If you're like me, you've had the feeling. The feeling that everything's just lickety-split as you drive through your neighborhood. Until suddenly, your car decides it's not on your side anymore. And it's not just a soft layoff. No, it breaks down in the worst spot, on a main road. It literally hates you. You get out in traffic and helplessly call RACQ or NRMA to save you from the wrath of angry drivers trying to get home from work that day. Well, this happened to me, except I wasn't in my neighborhood. I was over an hour's drive from home. I was on my way to a friend's house from a filming job, and my 1994 Land Rover decided, to put it bluntly, cark it. I got everything diagnosed and the mechanic said my transfer case had seized and it would be a minimum of $2,000 to fix. I said, yeah, I can't afford that. Then I thought about this for a while. At the time I was protesting the climate crisis for a week in Brisbane. Can I really profess to be an environmentalist if I drive a big old diesel four-wheel drive? For most people, it seems justifiable. It's hard to pick up your kids from school on a bike, although it can be done. But the more I thought, I realized there are other ways to get around. You see, recently I've been looking into sustainability. It's part of the reason I just launched my new video production business, Nature Media. And I discovered there are plenty of ways to get around other than owning your own car. Buses, trains, light rail, bikes, motorbikes, walking, and electric skateboards, or electric mobility in general. So, what would my life look like without a car? Would I be screwed anytime someone asked me out? Would I need to take Ubers everywhere? Turns out this was not the case. I ended up selling the Land Rover for scrap metal. I'd taken care of her for 5 amazing years. I loved her, but it was time to go. Had that for 5 years. Oh well, on to bigger and better things, I suppose. I actually used to work for an electric skateboard company for over a year, so I already knew a fair bit about how they worked, and I had a few spare parts lying around, and I knew I wanted it to be all-terrain, to deal with less than ideal roads. I love the feeling of having immense power under your foot. It literally feels like a rocket ship. The basic design actually came from another company I visited last year in Montreal, called Skateboards. Their design and ride feel are just like a snowboard carving. I don't snowboard, but man, I love the way that their Nazare board felt. I'm fully aware that this may not be the most carbon efficient way for me to get around. I could ride a regular bike, but I'm not particularly fit, and the idea of arriving extremely tired and sweaty to work or school definitely doesn't appeal to most people. The main footprint would be from the batteries, which are rated to last approximately 300 to 500 full cycles before they drop below 80% capacity, like your phone. As battery tech increases though, new batteries will be more efficient and require less material for the same capacity. My Land Rover, that ain't getting more efficient over time. Okay, so what is the cost breakdown? Well, I got most of the parts secondhand, so that's something I'd highly recommend doing if you're considering building your own to save some coin. The original Mountainboard with trucks and wheels was actually only $120. The motors I originally got were $150, which were secondhand, but I later replaced them with bigger ones, which cost $250. So we'll just go with the bigger amount. The pulleys and belts were $120, the batteries were $330, the charger was $90, the remote was $60, the speed controller was $300, which is the electronics, or like the brain of the skateboard if you want. And the only new parts I bought were the motor mounts plus the labor cost for that, which was $16 plus some vodka cruisers and a burrito for my friend who's a metalworks machinist. Bolts and screws were $10, the case from J-Calf to hold the electronics was $15, and the battery case and strap, which I actually already had, were $20. So in total, it ended up being $1,355, or just under 900 USD. I think I did pretty well. So, by comparison, Evolve Skateboards, which I just so happen to live around the corner from, is the most popular electric skateboard brand in Australia, and they sell their bamboo electric skateboard, the GTR, for a whopping $1,900. with similar range and less power than my DIY board. They are better quality than they used to be, but for most people it's simply too expensive here in Australia. So what do you think of the new Bamboo GTR decks? It's GTX.
Well, I think I know where they took their inspiration from, let's put it that way.
So a lot of people end up going with cheaper Chinese-based companies, and then they're disappointed when they find out that those boards are really low quality products and only last 6 months and then break down. And the warranty is only 6 months, so yeah. Okay, so that's the cost. So how does this compare to my old Land Rover, which I sold for, you ready? $350 plus 180 refund on my registration, so 530 total. Yep. Now I know it doesn't sound like a great trade-off at this point, but if we take into account the expenses of both vehicles, including registration, 730, insurance, 900, petrol costs, 1200 plus, and repair and maintenance costs, after all that, I'm actually way ahead on the skateboard after a year. That totals approximately $3,830 per year. And what's the yearly expenses of the board? Well, it's a bit complicated. Spare belts are approximately $5 each, so let's assume the worst and I go through 4 of those per year. So a flat tube is $20, so let's say I get 2 of those, so that's $40. And the cost of replacement tires, 1 new set per year is $80. The energy cost of charging approximately 100 times per year, which is about what I use, charge it up about 2 times per week. That is approximately $10, assuming you're not using solar panels or any other renewable electricity. The batteries, well, it's already in the cost, but if I'm to replace them, then it's approximately $82.50 per year if we assume a 4-year lifespan, and I'll explain this later. So in total, that's $232.50 per year. Compare that to $3,830, that's a lot less. Now there's a bunch of other stuff like public transport fares and ride-sharing costs, etc, but that's a bit too complex for this video and it really depends on where you live. But it's fair to say that it will be substantially less than what it costs you to get around in a car. Okay, so now I've got this board. Where can I go and what's my limitations? I can expect to get approximately 35 to 40 kilometers of range on a single charge. The battery is a total of 532 watt hours, which is pretty big for an electric skateboard battery. This range comes down to a few things. My weight, which is approximately 70 kilos, the terrain, any inclines and declines, so hills. The wind also plays a big part, and also stopping and starting. So if you're stopping and starting a lot, that's going to take up more electricity. The most efficient way to ride actually is to just keep a consistent speed at around 25 to 30 kilometers because that's not too much wind resistance. The 2 6S LiPo batteries I'm using, which are running at 12S voltage, take about 4 hours to charge on my charger, but they could be charged in about an hour with a faster charger, which I didn't want to spend oodles of money on. Remember I mentioned a 4-year lifespan? Well, that is possible and can even be longer if I take care of my batteries. Basically what that means is not discharging them to 0% hardly ever, and only charging them to about 90%. So it reduces my range a bit, but this increases the lifespan dramatically. We're talking from 300 cycles from regular usage to 1,000 plus. And even then, they'll just hold less capacity, so I'll still be able to use them past that point. The other advantage is I can actually take it on public transport, so the tram, the bus, or any small car with no issues, and you can't do that with a bike. So how much slower am I on the board than my car was? Turns out, not a whole lot, especially for shorter distance commutes. Anything up to about 5 kilometers, I'd say I can get there in about 1.5 times the amount of time it takes a car to do. So if a car takes 10 minutes to do 5 kilometers, then I take about 15 minutes. The longer journeys, it becomes less time efficient. If I need to ride to the north end of the Gold Coast, that's a 17 kilometer journey each way. That journey is approximately 45 minutes in each direction, which is still markedly faster than public transport. The average time, including waiting at the connecting bus stops, is actually over an hour and costs $9 in fares, as opposed to about 10 cents per charge of the board. So the last disadvantage is a glaring one: riding in the wet. If you insulate and cover your electronics and motors, you can ride in the rain, though this is another reason I like tires over regular street wheels as well, which actually become really dangerous in wet weather. For me, it doesn't rain often enough here to warrant doing all that work and adding weight, but my electronics are sealed and my motors only really get wet if it's actually raining on top of them. And finally, let's talk the legalities of these vehicles. In Australia, you don't need to register them, so there's a $330 advantage over a moped, for example. And in my home state of Queensland, thanks to lobbying by the scooter sharing companies and other electric skateboard brands like Evolve, they're actually legal here to ride on footpaths and bike paths, and a few exceptions about riding on neighbourhood streets and one-way streets. Everywhere else in Australia, they're either illegal or they're in a grey area, where the law hasn't caught up with the technology. I guess you could call us the California of Australia since it's legal there too. Overall, if you're into skating and love the feeling of freedom it brings, I'd highly recommend switching your smaller commutes to an electric skateboard. Would I recommend you sell your car? It depends on what your needs are, and if they can be met with another form of transport. Right now, I can get away with it. Once I start spending too much on car sharing or Uber, then I'll consider getting another car. But for now, I'm absolutely loving this, and it encourages me to buy food locally as well. Yes, I even use my board to do most of my shopping. 2 trips a week means I never have too much to carry, and it also stops me buying shit I don't need. Do I think most people should build their own electric skateboards? Honestly, I think e-bikes, which are actually legal in most places, is a better option for most people. But do I think you should build your own transport? Absolutely. So I've given you all the information, the data, expenses, range, advantages, disadvantages, costs, but I actually want you to put all of that aside for a second. I think the most important thing when choosing your mode of transport is, what is it that you actually enjoy the most? What brings you the most happiness, reduces your stress, and helps you stay active? All that data talk is just numbers. At the end of the day, the reason I ride my board isn't to reduce my carbon footprint or save extra money. It's because I just prefer riding places. I love knowing that nobody else has the same transport that I do, because I made it my own. And there's real satisfaction in that. Knowing you can fix your board at any point, if you have the tools with you, is a really good plus as well. So go, design your dream transport, and go out and build it. If that's a skateboard, wonderful. If it's a bike, great. Do what you enjoy most and can get you most places locally, because that's the thing you'll stick with and want to use every day.
I remember the words.
So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe for future stories on how to be more sustainable and holistic in everyday life. And yeah, much appreciated. Until next time, stay shredding.